All right, sir, it's all you.
Okay. Right, so this is going to talk about Pulp 4, kind of what our plans are and what the next steps are. Give a little bit of kudos to Grant. Parts of these slides are taken from his presentation last year, so I'll give him credit. Quick recap. Why have a new version of Pulp? Well, we've now been using Pulp 3 in production in various capacities for 5 years, and we've learned a lot. Our promises about not changing the REST APIs does make a few improvements impossible, but we do not want to break your workflows, and we do want to make Pulp better. But there was a very difficult transition from Pulp 2 to Pulp 3. We never want to go through anything that significant ever again. And so, we would like for any changes to be very limited, very focused, and very easy to adapt to. So what was the original plan for Pulp 4? Well, it was a pretty short list. We want to make domains required, make all URLs include a domain. There'd be a v4 API that is in parallel with the existing v3 API, while the v3 API would be deprecated, but it would still work. The use of hrefs would be replaced with PRNs, which are a new Pulp resource name. It's basically a new just way of providing an ID for a resource. And then there would be some subtle adjustments allowed also with the plugins. There was an idea that we would move the RBAC policy configuration to settings.py, and we would remove direct artifact access from the API. The primary considerations here were, we want to make the upgrade path very easy, allow transitioning over time. And so in Pulp 3, we would still have the new v4 API appear just as kind of tech preview. And then obviously all the existing endpoints would be maintained. And then in Pulp 4, all of the new v4 APIs would be official. And the v3 APIs would continue to exist, but maybe not as actively maintained. So since last year, there have been some changes to the plan, but mostly it has involved the list getting shorter. Unfortunately, we have found we cannot really supplant hrefs with PRNs. So PRNs have been added to many APIs and will be added to more APIs, but they will never completely replace hrefs. The idea to move RBAC policy configuration to settings.py is not workable. And the removal of direct artifact access from the API will likely not happen. So on PRNs, we had hoped that Pulp href and all the various hrefs would be able to be removed in favor of the new PRN or Pulp resource name identifier, but it's not possible. Hrefs contain routing information, and without that routing information, it's not possible for type-safe API bindings and such to work. And there may be solutions, but it require a lot of client-side logic. It is not short-term feasible, and so that is no longer being considered for direct artifact access, again, likely, or removing direct artifact access, again, likely not happening in Pulp 4. There was still some discussion about this many months ago, but it seemed like it was leaning towards not being able to do it. at least not soon. Ooh, that got cut off. So RBAC. So the original plan was to simplify the current implementation of RBAC so that it could be configured entirely from setup.py, or even to remove it entirely in light of now having a stronger implementation of domains. The thought was, well, maybe that would be enough for most users, or all users that needed RBAC. Maybe they could use domains instead, and that would serve their needs. But after consulting with users on their needs and their use cases, that's not plausible. RBAC does serve an important role in some use cases, and the current thinking is there are still some other needs that we need from RBAC that the current implementation doesn't fulfill, and so maybe we can do an integration with SAML to fulfill those needs. Okay, so some of the challenges that I had implementing the v4 namespace over the last year. I'm not going to discuss all of them, just one of them. In theory, this should have been pretty simple because Django REST framework natively supports API versioning. Unfortunately, one of the core architectural decisions we've made complicated things a bit. So we have this class called matching regex viewname, and it's a helper class for defining matching rules for master detail models. This is all kind of technical if you're a user, so this is just speaking to developers momentarily. And it basically allows you to specify a regex pattern that matches view names. But question, so how do you do a reverse lookup of a route from this view name or this regex pattern, especially including the namespace, which is actually a separate thing. It's not actually part of the view name. And so this is the namespace versioning class from, or part of the namespace versioning class from Django REST framework. You can see that it appends the view name and the namespace and does a reverse lookup. You can't really do it. And unfortunately, we're using this pattern in many places. You can see here, so there's detail identity field and detail related field. We've got these view name patterns that are entirely regex based. And so so this is a problem that there's no good solution for yet, unfortunately. But the overall plan is still valid. We still want a major version bump to have only a small list of non-intrusive changes with as much backwards compatibility as possible. The process that we had laid out last year remains the same. Pulp4 is still going to be domain aware across all plugins as a rule, and it should still have a v4 namespace. And in terms of big changes, that is probably it, at least for users. And so all of this basically remains the same from last year. Pulp3 will have a tech preview before API namespace at some point. Any changes to APIs will be added to the v4 endpoint. There will be less of them because, again, We can't remove hrefs. And so the when, it's a little bit fuzzy. Maybe Q1 or Q2 of next year. And Pulp 4 release, maybe Q2, Q3. Don't have a great estimate there. I'm not currently working on V4 anymore. So we'll have to pick it up first. Pick it up again. And again, all the V3 endpoints continue to exist even once Pulp 4 is released. So users can migrate over to any new APIs over time on Pulp 3. And hopefully that should make it much easier to roll forward and not have big infrastructure changes all happening at once. And then eventually, same as we discussed last year, in the future, the process kind of repeats. The V3 API would be removed in like Pulp 5, V4 would be maintained, V5 would become available, and so on. And what we need to think about. So again, the issue I mentioned, the namespace routing. How do we resolve the conflict between some of Pulp's current architecture and namespace routing? What minor breaking changes do plugins want to make? Again, they need to be reasonable and limited. But it's an opportunity for plugins to do that. I had an extra slide here. It disappeared. Okay. Anyway. Yes, so questions.
Actually, I'm going to recognize myself since I have my hand up. One of the things I just want to add, Daniel, to this for folk watching, the things that we are learning right now as we go through the difficulties that Daniel's talking about with V4. Hopefully the idea is the V4 and Pulp 4, when they come out, as Daniel points out, will be a small number of changes, but it will have taught us what we need to change to make this an easier process going forward, which is really one of the big goals of V4. This is going to be a very consumable change, both for our users and for the Pulp team as developers. So we're learning a ton doing this, which means that it will make V5 a lot more feature focused and a lot less how do we even make this happen. It's always the N+1 problem where you find out the decisions you made 6 years ago are impacting your ability to do this, just kind of where we are.
Yep.
So, and in terms of the when V4, the API path will show up in Pulp, it's a high priority for the beginning of this year. Last year we said, well, we might do it soon, but there was a whole bunch of other feature work and the work that you've heard about with Copper and with services and features for our downstreams and our users. So V4 and the march to Pulp 4 is a much higher priority for the beginning of 2026. So pay attention to Discourse and Matrix. You're going to see a lot more stuff coming in there, as we have done actually over the course of this year, with gathering information from all y'all in the community about, we want to do this thing and we don't think anybody uses this particular workflow, and then finding community members raising their hands going, can you not remove that? Because, so we're going to learn a lot again as we go through this process. Thanks, Daniel. Other questions?
Thank you, Ryan.
Jared.
Do you know the exact workflow that was using artifacts that stopped us from being able to remove direct access in V4?
I don't.
David gave us one.
Yes.
Matthias?
In general, if you have content that for its creation needs to have multiple files. In Gem, for example, we have the 2 artifact content, but the second artifact is derived from the first, so that's not it.
Mhm.
But if you have a piece of content and the specific example is the source package in Debian, I think, which usually consists of 3 files, which is 1 tarball, 1 patch set, and 1 signature. And yeah, the workflow is you need to somehow provide all 3, and then you can create 1 content unit from them.
Right.
Yeah, that's correct. So it's a control file instead of a signature, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not the original one that was discussed, but that I suppose would be one of them. Yes.
And my idea is that you could just upload all 3 files in 1 request, which should be possible since we do multi-part anyway.
Peter's got a comment. Can't we just require that to be 1 tarball? But then it requires one can with that API. This would be a way to address that. The API takes the tarball, and then the far side of the API would unpack it, create the individual artifacts, create the single content unit. But we just don't have such a thing currently.
Also, I think for the user, it's extra burden to first create the tarball.
Correct. We also have endpoints where.
And again, yeah.
Go ahead, Matthias.
Packing up stuff could be something the CLI can do again, transparently.
Sure, at a higher level. And we have APIs that people use in their workflows of, I'm just going to upload a bunch of things, files as artifacts. And then my workflow needs those SHA-256 and says, okay, create an RPM out of that one and create a Debian package out of that one. And as I assign them to repositories. And we'd like people to get away from those, but that is a current set of APIs. So that's, I think, the discussion that happened around artifacts.
Yeah, it just occurs to me, Pulp 4 sounds like a big thing with all new features, but actually it's about the breaking changes, so you can expect more things to be removed than added.
Yeah.
We usually can add things without making a major release.
And that's basically true. Most of the features that at some point had been discussed for Pulp 4 have been added to Pulp 3. PRNs being a big example.
Exactly.
All of that can be added to the existing APIs without having to wait for Pulp 4.
Right. The big thing about major, the major release number for Pulp, going from 3 to 4 or from 4 to 5, we already have in Pulp the idea of a breaking change release, like 3.100 might potentially break things, but what it won't break is the public-facing REST API, the thing that users of Pulp rely on. What it can do, what those .y breaking changes do, is change the plugin API so that plugin authors have to adapt. But what we promise our users is, if you're using Pulp 3 now, barring bug fixes, we strive very hard to make it so that your REST calls will continue working for the whole entire lifetime of Pulp 3, the V3 API. What V4 lets us do is make changes to the REST API in ways that will cause people that have clients talking to Pulp, they'll have to adapt to it. So we have kind of a regular cadence of right now it's every 15 core releases. We tell plugin authors every 15 releases, you might have to make some code changes to adapt to things we've learned in Pulp, but we're not changing the REST API. Your users will be fine. With the V4 API, we are telling our users, if you want to move to Pulp 4 and move to the V4 API, your client calls may have to change. So that's the real key difference, why we change major releases much less frequently.
Yeah, REST API. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, we work hard, as you all know. We work hard to not force change on the users of Pulp, because we have both in the community and obviously Red Hat products, we have a lot of code that talks to Pulp directly, and we kind of don't want to force all those people to have to make unexpected changes.
Yeah.
That's really the overarching goal here.
Yeah. REST API and some other minor things. So like here's my missing disappearing slides is as an example for the RPM plugin, whenever we move to v4, it will be Z standard compressed repository metadata by default. And don't sync .tree info by default. That'll be an opt-in. So like those are default changes that you don't really want to make in Pulp 3, but Pulp 3 to Pulp 4, it's fine to make. But they're both relatively minor and like shouldn't be too breaking. But that's the sort of thing that we can change.
Exactly.
What are we going to do about the plugin versions when we release Pulp 4? There's like half of our plugins have the same 3.0.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the major version, the 3?
Yep.
And then the other half are like random numbers. Some are 0,
Mm-hmm.
some are 1. Or some of them going to get bumped to 4, and others just whatever.
I mean, my take, Joe, is the plugins will make whatever changes they need to supply a v4 API, and that can stay in their current major release. Then, if a plugin is going to be making essentially breaking changes at the REST API level, they're probably going to want to bump their major version. But one of the things about a plugin architecture like ours is that's up to the plugin owners, the plugin teams, to decide how much are we changing here. But it goes back to, if we're going to make changes where if I have a client today talking to your plugin 3.x version, and after Pulp 4 comes out and you have a plugin that says, hey, I need Pulp 4, not just V3, Pulp 3 running a V4 API, I need Pulp 4 because I'm changing the REST API, then you're going to want to bump your major version. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Outstanding. Other questions? All right. Good deal. Good talk, folks. Daniel, I'm going to end the recording here.